I got this house in March of 2023 and the banks rejected me for a mortgage.
Rejected.
If you are new to the channel, my name is Navjot and the objective of this channel is to spread financial literacy amongst new immigrants. Coming back to today's topic, there is a lot of misinformation which is available when you are self-employed. A lot of people say that you cannot get a mortgage. I'll try to bust all those myths and give you hard numbers of why it makes sense to go to alternate lending if the banks reject you. So let's get started. So in today's video, we'll be talking about why was I rejected for a bank mortgage. I'll also be introducing what B lenders are, and they're also called alternate lenders. I don't really like the word B lenders, so they are alternate lenders, and we'll talk about that. And we'll also talk about why alternate lenders make sense, and we'll also talk about the maths behind it. Now let's talk about why was I rejected by the banks for this mortgage. And the reason is that I'm self-employed. A lot of you know that I don't have a full-time job. This is my full-time job, content creation and doing mortgages. And Simran also is a contract worker. So she has a full-time job, but because it's a US-based company, they pay her through the incorporation, and technically she also becomes self-employed. And that was the reason why I was rejected, because what the banks are looking for is 2 years of tax filing if you are self-employed. Now technically I did complete 2 years, but I did not file for the second year taxes. Plus my income in the first year and the second year was very different. So there are norms around that. There are regulations around, what they can and what they cannot take. And that was one of the reasons why I was rejected. The other thing that the bank like is that you have full-time job, because for some reason, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, for some reason they do feel that full-time jobs are more secure. Now, it kind of is true, but honestly, looking at all the tech layoffs, I don't think full-time job is any safer than a contract job. But unfortunately, I did not make the rules, banks did. And the third one, and honestly, I don't see it a massive problem for South Asians, for people I've worked with, is they require good credit. It should be ideally 680 plus. A lot of people think that it requires 700, people require 750, you need 800 credit score. No. The minimum credit score that you need is 680, and sometimes you can also be qualified for lower credit score, which is 620, 630, as long as it makes sense. Now, if you watched my video where I talked about the amount of money that we made last year, the amount of mortgage that we required, it was about $520,000 for this particular house. It was nowhere close to the amount of money that we made. Now, the credit score for Simran and I was very good, but I did not have a 2-year tax filing as a self-employed, and Simran does not have a full-time job, and therefore we were rejected. So are these rules fair? Absolutely not. Now let's talk about a topic which is very close to my heart, and we talk about what people do when the banks reject them. And here's a clip of what happened last year.
We're taking you inside mortgage fraud where it starts.
Income is not issue, because income he can make.
You wanna go to jail for me?
Yeah, they will do some documentation.
That's why I wanted to meet in person, because a lot of things cannot be discussed over the phone.
हमको ना कुछ salt and pepper करना पड़ेगा.
Yeah, they will do some documentation showing that you guys are making more.
So like you saw in the video, people are committing mortgage fraud with mortgage agents charging them 1%, 2%, sometimes even 3% to qualify people for a mortgage, which is absolutely stupid. And they call it jugaad, but it's not jugaad. It is mortgage fraud, and it is an offense. And if you are caught, the best case scenario is that the mortgage fraud will come on the credit and there'll be no bank credit for life. And the worst case scenario, and I've seen this very closely, is deportation, where if this becomes a criminal offense, because if this is a very structured mortgage fraud that's happening by the mortgage agent, this entire case can become a criminal offense, and therefore you can be deported if you are on PR. Now, a lot of people think that you cannot get caught when you are doing that, and that might be true, but if you are caught, the worst case scenario is really bad, and even the best case scenario is as good as deportation, because if you're not able to buy a car, if you're not able to get a bank credit, if you're not able to get a credit card, it's as good as leaving the country. Now, because I am a mortgage agent, I get memos from FISRA and OSFI, and we know that they are cracking down on fraud. And it's now becoming increasingly difficult for these fraud agents to create falsified documents and make a fool out of this entire system. Now, I made an entire video on mortgage fraud a few months back. If you are interested in knowing more about this, do check out the link in the description. Now, the question is, what should self-employed people do and people who do not have enough credit do when they are rejected by the banks? And the answer is simple. You need to talk to a mortgage agent who understands policy well. There are B lenders, also called alternate lenders, who look at self-employed income very differently. They do not require 2 years of self-employed income. They are okay with 6 months of bank statements or self-employed contract income. They will lend on low credits and even bankruptcies, and they can lend you more money for the same amount of taxable income. All you need to do is reach out to someone who understands policy well. Now let's talk about the differences between a prime lender and an alternate lender or a B lender when it comes to costs. Now, first of all, We all know what prime lenders is. It's the top 5 banks, but we also have a misconception about First National, RMG, MCAP. These are all credit unions. They are all mono lenders. A lot of people think that they are private lenders or alternate lenders or B lenders. They are not. They have similar policies as that of the top 5 banks. In fact, First National's biggest investor is TD, and therefore they all operate under the same umbrella of prime or A lending. And when it comes to alternate lenders, they are not a black box. They are all banks you actually know. The first one that I work very closely with is Equitable Bank. This is the bank who gave me the mortgage for this particular house as self-employed as well. Then you also have Home Trust, where in the US, the biggest investor of Home Trust is Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's company. And then you have Duca, which is a local credit union in Ontario, and they're pretty good. And my sister's mortgage is with them, and they are called near prime lenders because their interest rates are not very different from the top banks. Now, these are only 3 of 40-50 different lenders that we work with. So if you have a problem and the banks are not qualifying you for a mortgage, all you need to do is click on the link in the description, book a call with me, and we'll find you a solution. Now, let's talk about the difference between the prime lenders and the alt lenders. The first one is about interest rates, where you can take a fixed or a variable rate. But when we talk about the alt lenders, you can only take a fixed rate, which is 0.7 to 1% higher depending on the strength of the file. When it comes to down payment, you can do a minimum 5% down payment. But when it comes to alternate lenders, you require a minimum of 20% down payment. Now, when you do a 5% down payment, you pay something called as CMHC insurance or mortgage insurance, which is 3 to 4% of the mortgage amount. But if you're doing a 20% down, you do not pay any insurance premium. However, when you're going to an alternate lender like Equitable Bank, there's a lot more risk that they are taking because they are willing to give me a mortgage when the banks actually rejected me. So in order to cover that cost of that risk, they charge a 1% lender fee. And then when it comes to amortization, the maximum which is available for top 5 banks is 30 years if you're doing a 20% down. And for alternate lenders, you can go up to 35, even 40 years of amortization to reduce the burden of monthly payments. Now, the reason why I wanted to discuss about costs here is because I do understand that the cost of borrowing has increased when you're going to an alternate lender. And this is one of the reasons why these fraud mortgage agents are making documents, because they are charging the same 1% that you will generally pay to the alternate lender to cover their risk. But if you compare this higher cost of borrowing with an alternate lender versus the cost and the risk that comes with committing fraud, if you are caught, you can be deported. You have made so many sacrifices to come to Canada and make a life here that it's not worth risking everything just to buy a house. So do the right thing, reach out to the right mortgage agent, because there is a policy solution for everything. Now, coming back to the presentation, should you even go self-employed or contract? And the answer is, do you have 20% down payments? Because B lenders do not operate with less than 20% down. So if the answer is yes, you should 100% go self-employed, because then your ceiling on the amount of money that you can make is a lot higher and you'll be making a lot more money and you will be saving a lot more taxes, and we'll talk about that in the next slide as well. And if the answer is no, you do not have 20% down, then either you'll have to wait till you have the 20% down, you have to stick to your full-time job till the time you close your first house. Now, despite the high cost, why do alternate lending still make sense? Now, let me take an example of if you have a full-time job where the banks will lend you versus if you have a contract job where the banks will ask for 2 years of tax filing. Let's take the same income, $150,000 and $150,000 in both the scenarios. The federal tax in your full-time job, which will be deducted at source, will be $27,000. Then we have provincial tax, which is about $16,000. Then you have CPP and EI premiums, which is about $4,500. And overall, your after-tax income will be $50,000 less, about $49,000 less at $101,462. Now, let's compare this against a contract job. If you have it through your incorporation, what happens is you take dividends as personal income because you only need $5,000 a month. That's the dividend that I take from my incorporation. So irrespective of how much money I make in the incorporation, I only take out $5,000 a month, which is $60,000. On that personal income, I will pay federal tax of $6,000, and the tax rate is a lot lower because my slab at $60,000 is a lot lower than what it is at $150,000. My provincial tax is about $3,000. I do not have to pay any CPP and EI premiums because these are dividends, these are not salary. So compared to the $50,000 of taxes that I'm paying as a full-time employee, I only pay about $10,000 or less than $10,000 of taxes as my personal dividend income. But I also need to pay taxes on the balance net income in the business, which is $150,000 minus the $60,000 of dividends that I took, which is $90,000. And on that, I have to pay 12.2% in Ontario, which is about $11,000. So after tax income, if I include my personal income after taxes and my business income after taxes, will be $129,650, which is an entire $28,000 more than if I was a full-time employee. So like you can see here, even if you have a full-time job and you are bank's favorite and you're able to get a mortgage from a bank, it's still not worth going to a full-time job just to take a mortgage from a bank, because you save $28,000 if you are on contract and if you structure your income very well with an accountant. And not to forget, if you are on contract, in most cases, and in fact in Simran's case, she actually made double the money. So your income is in fact much more than your full-time job, and you also deduct expenses because you need an office, you need stationery, you need a lot of things for your job. For example, for my job, I need a camera, I need Zoom subscriptions, and therefore all that cost can be deducted from your business income, and your taxable income on the business is a lot lower. These are all legal expenses that you can deduct. I'm not doing anything that wrong here, and still, because of how the business taxes are structured, you pay a lot less tax. So your overall savings will be a lot more than $28,000 if you are on contract. But the downside is, if you are on contract and if you have not completed 2 years of taxable income, you will be going to an alternate lender. Let's say you are taking a $800,000 mortgage, you will be paying about $6,000 more in interest, which is about $500 a month, and you will be paying a 1% lender fee, which is only one time $8,000, and that cost of borrowing is half of what you would otherwise pay CRA if you are a full-time employee and you were going to a bank to get your mortgage. Now, don't get me wrong, 90% of mortgages that I do are with big banks, but I also wanted to give a flip side of, if you're self-employed and if you do not have 2 years of income, you do not have to resort to fraud. There are options available if you have 20% down. All you need to do is book a call from the description and I'll reach out to you and we'll discuss about your options. And do subscribe to the channel so that you do not miss any video on this channel. I make videos every single week, so do subscribe to the channel. That's all I have for today. मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में, तब तक के लिए बाय बाय।